Yes, I believe that it's just built in us as men to want to achieve. I can't speak for everybody, but I know in my case, I'm attracted to challenge. And part of it, honestly, is too, I am my own worst critic.
Yeah.
And I'm really hard on myself on two things that matter a lot to me, and that's family and it's my work.
This is Nate Dewberry, and welcome back to another episode of the Redeemed Man podcast. I'm so excited today about our guest. I have with me Sean Knox. Sean, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Sean has grown up in the pest control industry. Is president of Knox Pest Control. Received his undergraduate degree from Georgia Southern University, and has a master's degree from Regent University and Baylor University. Married to Crawford and has 3 kids. And Crawford and Sean are an amazing couple with 3 great kids who do so much in our community and just are great friends of ours. So thank you so much for joining us on this episode. He loves a lot of different adventure sports, so we're going to get into a little bit of that. First off, I want to hear all about, you just got back recently from the highest mountain in South America. What in the world are you doing? Like, you tell me about how you got into mountain climbing and what does that look like for you?
Sure. Well, again, thank you for having me and thank you for your kind words. It's really good to be with you. So I guess first question, how did I get into this unique sport, especially living in Georgia at, I think, about 400 feet above sea level? So it was a very stressful time in business in particular. And this goes back to about 2018.
Yeah.
And a lot of things going on that were kind of keeping me up at night. I fell into this habit of waking up in the middle of the night and never thinking about anything positive. It was always negative. And so I've always been attracted to challenging events. I've done ultra marathons and triathlons and that sort of thing prior to this. So mountaineering had been something I was kind of interested in. Got Mount Hood on my radar, which is really a good first step. And a really good friend of mine and we went out to Oregon and were able to summit Mount Hood, had a great day, a great guide. And really kind of begin to think this is a fun thing. Yeah. It's challenging, gets the heart rate up, gets a little scary. Mount Hood is actually has some technical stuff to it, and a lot of exposure in some areas, which will take your breath away. Our guide said, "Hey, next thing, you guys did great. You got to look at Rainier." So then we did Mount Rainier the following year, had success there. Again, great guides, great team, great weather. And then it's kind of snowballed from there. Did Kilimanjaro a few years ago. And then Aconcagua is the most recent mountain that I've climbed. It's actually the highest mountain in the Americas, north and south. It's the highest mountain outside of the Himalayas. And
over 22,000 feet, right?
Yes, I believe 23,000, something like that. And so, like, one of the neat things about that climb, because they're not really climbing in the Himalayas this time of year due to weather, when we did summit, I know we may speak about that in a little bit, we were actually the highest people on the earth at that point, because we were the only ones that made summit that day. And so it's been a great sport, learned a lot. My wife isn't probably the biggest fan because there is a danger element, and we may speak about some of that. We saw that on our last climb up close and personal. But it's a great sport, and I'm glad to do it.
Well, I was joking earlier with our videographer Matthew about, I was like, is it Aconcagua? I was working on my pronunciation to see if I could get it right. And I was pretty close. And, my Spanish is not the best, but
you did well.
Definitely. When I think about adventure sports or challenging things, for me, I think all of us as men are wired in some way or another for adventure. I think we are encouraged, inspired. I think we like a challenge. I think it's in our DNA. I think it's who we are as men to need something to challenge us. I think a lot of times the reason guys get in trouble or get off the right path is because oftentimes they're not challenged in healthy ways. And they're looking for something that's adventurous, and sometimes they find the wrong things for that adventure. but it sounds like you found something that has really been refreshing for you as well. Because I think there's that sense of accomplishment that is not based in our work, which sometimes is good to find something different that we can have as a challenge. And so I want to hear more about this most recent climb. I know there's a lot of stories, but tell me a little bit about what does it look like to climb at that point, the highest peak in the Americas, and get to a place where you're able to accomplish this feat. What does it take? The training, the preparation, the guides, all that goes into getting to that point.
Well, and I will try not to ramble because there's a lot there. But to what you just said, yes, I believe that it's just built in us as men to want to achieve. I can't speak for everybody, but I know in my case, I'm attracted to challenge. And part of it, honestly, is too, I am my own worst critic.
Yeah.
And I'm really hard on myself on two things that matter a lot to me, and that's family and it's my work. Yeah. And even though I've had success in both, God's blessing, it really is led to that success. But I've been fortunate, great family, great business. I still have a tendency to, there's a term that we like to use, that we ought to have some healthy discontent. Yeah. I have the discontent part down. It's the healthy part I need to work on. So mountaineering allows me, it's about me at that point. Now, you are on a team and you do have guides, but it's not a race. It's just about personal achievement. Yeah. And that's the part that's really neat. So Aconcagua, it winds up being about a 3-week trip. So this is a mountain. It's a big mountain. It requires, a fair amount of time. It's funny, the training, which was one of your questions, when I talked to Alpine Ascents, that's the group that we use. They're a U.S.-based group. Okay. We used them to climb Rainier, and they just got a great reputation, and they climb all over the world. I was telling them about the training that I was doing at the time, and he said, man, that sounds great, but that's not going to work. He said, especially being in Georgia, you've got to get vert, and the only way to get consistent vert there, and when I say vert, it's getting vertical, is you're going to have to get on a Stairmaster. So I spent about 4 months, and the only Stairmaster that I could find was at the YMCA, which fortunately I had a membership to. There's just not a lot of Stairmasters around anymore. It's all Peloton these days. And but I would get a heavy pack, and I would sit there and just grind on the Stairmaster. And I felt confident because the measurables that they put in place, I was actually doing those in half the time. Yeah. So I felt like, example is they wanted to see 2,000 to 2,500 feet of vertical in an hour, and I was doing that in 30 to 40 minutes. So I felt good there, and I was also mixing in some of the other things I did, weight training, running, going to Standing Boy Trails was really great. That's a great resource we have here locally for mountain biking and trail running and what have you. But then there's the unknown and the part that I can't do a lot about, and that is acclimatization. Yeah. How will your body handle that? And that's and we'll talk about how these climbs bring you closer to God. I'm sure at some point in the interview, but that was one of the things you just really had to pray up. Fortunately, I've never had an issue with that. But you have to acclimatize fairly quickly on Aconcagua. And there were actually 3 deaths in January, one of which we witnessed. And there were a lot of people that were being choppered out. The chopper can go as high as Camp 2. Typically, though, they want to get you to base camp and chopper out of base camp. And there were a number of folks that had to abort their climb because of that. And that's one of those things that, especially even in Georgia, there's not a lot you can do. Yeah. Your body just has to adjust. So that is one of the challenges, but an area that we really didn't struggle.
Has there been other struggles?
So yes, there's a physical side. Went in feeling really strong and did well there, and did have a little bit of headaches and that sort of thing. But that's expected. Yeah. Could not get my heart rate as low as I would have liked. So even though it wasn't problematic, it did cause some concern. Yeah. I had to have a physical done just the other day, and my resting heart rate's in the 50s. I think it was 52 yesterday. There were days that were rest days I couldn't get it below 110. So when that sort of thing is going on, you know it and you feel it, and it does cause a little concern. But fortunately, we had a trauma surgeon on our team, and some of the things he was saying about, hey, don't worry about it, you'll be fine, brought a little bit of comfort.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Always good to have somebody that is medically trained giving you a little peace of mind.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So you mentioned the people being helicoptered off and then the loss of life.
Mm-hmm.
How did that impact you mentally? Was it a moment where you were able to kind of disconnect from what was going on around you, or were those moments where you really leaned into the Lord and went, all right, God, I see some things happening I'm not so sure about?
Well, it's funny. If you would have told me that before, I would have told you my reaction would have been different than what it was. Even though there are some parts of that mountain that there is some exposure, in some areas that could cause fear, I really never had fear on the climb. Now, I was praying like crazy about everything, but a lot of the things I was praying for had to do with just physically help me to hold tight and do well. When we got to the summit, there was a body on summit. A lady had passed away the day prior, and they had not got her down yet. She was from Romania, I believe. And really didn't look at her much, I felt maybe that would be a little bit disrespectful, so just kind of focused on what we were there doing. And but after the fact, I've thought about it some, but when we were on the mountain and we were hearing reports, because two of the people passed away right before we got there, and then we didn't know that there would be a body on top until about 4 hours out. The guides were notified via sat phone. If you had, again, asked me before, I would have told you, my emotion would be maybe some of fear, some of like, is this the right thing? But in the moment, that was not the response. I think I was so, and this is one of the things I do like about mountaineering. In retrospect, I think I was so focused on the task at hand, because by the time you're making that summit push, you've spent over 2.5 weeks on the mountain, and you've done a lot of work to get there. And quite frankly, you still have a lot of work ahead of you. The majority of the accidents in mountaineering occur on the descent. And that final day is about a 15-hour day. And so there's still a lot of work and a lot of things that could go wrong on the way down. And I just think that you are so laser focused in that moment that it's really hard to think of anything else.
How many fellow climbers summit on the day that you went up?
So we were a team of 3, and we were very fortunate. And there's a little backstory to that. I really had thought about not going because the guy that I climbed with and had done the other mountains with was not able to go at last minute. And I didn't want to just be a fifth wheel if there was a big group. But when I found out that the other 2 climbers did not know one another, and they both had really neat backgrounds, then I said, well, if nobody knows one another, well, we all kind of have a similar background. They had a lot of success on mountains, that, I'll still go ahead. So they were great. They were just phenomenal individuals. So I overall think we were a strong team as we were preparing to work our way up the mountain and doing, the climbs and that sort of thing. In some cases, we were doing them in half the time that had been allocated. So we knew that physically we were strong. Most teams are bigger than that. Most teams, a lot of international teams were there, and you'd see teams of 10 probably on average. Aconcagua only has a 30% success rate. It's one of the lower rates, and a lot of that is due to, again, people's bodies not being able to handle the altitude that you have to gain so quick, and then weather's a really big factor. We had great weather. And we had a strong team. So all 3 of us summited with our guide and an assistant guide. And I believe there was another team that I think 4 out of 10 summited that day. They didn't all make it.
And how long did you get at the summit?
We stayed at the summit for probably 20 minutes. And it's funny, I have never particularly thought much of the summit. The views are nice, but it's the sense of accomplishment. It really, really is. Getting to the summit is fine, and you get really cool pictures. but there is a feeling of, okay, I've accomplished this thing that it's hard to get that in life sometimes, because even in business, it's you don't always see the results of your effort, or if you do, it takes a long time to get there. And then a lot of times when you do, there's just something else. This is one of those events that when the goal is achieved, I mean, you could put your finger on it. And for me, that is just something very special. And at the end of the day, I have learned, I kind of joke around that this is my midlife crisis, but at least it's a healthy one. I think I'm better for it. And I have found out that I need it more than I probably ever knew that I did.
Thinking of that achievement side, have there been seasons of your life where that achievement or that goal was out of line with the priorities of what should be the place in your life? Because I think about achievement and I think about what you were doing even in the mountaineering, that sometimes having a goal, you can get misguided and you can focus so much on what you're trying to win or achieve that other things get out of line. Have there been seasons of your life where that desire to achieve or have a level of success has caused tension in other areas?
I was fortunate, and I will give my dad credit for this, that so our company, even though our family has been in this industry going back to the 20s, they sold, my dad and my granddad sold that family company in the 80s. And so when we restarted in the 90s, he took out the loan, and my brother and I were the free labor, and we both drive, and my mom was doing the admin. So it was very much a family effort. But I'll give my dad credit for this, that he never really brought work home, and he seemed to be able to leave it when he needed to leave it. And so I think that was a great example for me. I'm sure there have been times that I have let certain goals maybe affect other part of my life, but I think always been aware of that and not wanting to do that, in particular when it came to raising children. I'm sure that, matter of fact, I mean, there are a couple of ball games that I wish I'd have made or, things like that. But I've tried not to prioritize something in a way that it can become unhealthy. Especially when I was doing triathlon, I knew some folks that went through divorces, and part of it is because they were so into Ironman that they were neglecting their family. And it just reminded me that even things that can be deemed positive, if there's not moderation, they can also become a negative. So I've been aware of it. I don't know how well I've done it, and maybe Crawford would be the better one to ask.
So would you say your dad is by far the biggest influence in that, and the success of being able to stay grounded?
Yes, definitely in business and in family and in faith walk. He and my mom both have had an incredible faith journey. They have had challenges like anyone, both family and otherwise. But the strength of their faith has been inspiring, and I will give my dad in particular when it comes to balance. A lot of credit. Matter of fact, there were things that even when I got out of graduate school and was first, working in the company, there were things that he would let me handle that I don't know that I would be comfortable letting a 20-something-year-old handle for me. But he had a great line when my brother and I were both, now out of school, working full time. We essentially had one location. We have 19 locations now. Covering locations are in 3 offices. We service customers in 5. But he knew that we had ambition, that we wanted to grow, and one of his lines was, "I give you permission to fail, and I'll go do it." That's a great gift, and to have your dad tell you that at that age, I don't know that. I probably still hold on to things a little tighter than that. So, but he was a great example there.
And I think that what a legacy. I mean, you think about the influence father one of the things we often talk about is how our relationship with our dad either impacts us negatively or positively. And sometimes both. we can have both experiences, but to have that where not only business, but your faith. Talk a little bit about your own personal faith journey. How has those moments in mountaineering really deepened your walk with the Lord? Because I think, at least for me personally, being out in creation is one of those moments where, for me, sometimes moments are more spiritual than even in church. And so I'd love to hear how mountaineering's influenced your faith.
Yeah, it has. It's funny, when I finished Aconcagua, I told Crawford, my wife, the one word that resonated with me was dependency. And there's just a dependency in that type of environment in particular, to where there is danger, and there is there are certain things that have to happen within your body that are really kind of out of your control. I mean, you should hydrate a lot. You do these things that help, but they're not foolproof. And my prayer life, especially in those moments, is the best that it ever is. Rather in church or I think our prayer life typically increases when we go through challenge. So I've had business challenges and stuff to where it was a lot of on my knees. But I start every morning on my knees in prayer, and I just think that's a sign of humility, and that all things come from the Lord. But in the mountain environment, one is you are at all of His creation. Yeah. It is amazing, and a picture, video cannot put into words. Of course, the Aconcagua is in the Andes mountain range, and to see that range, especially when you're up high, it's unreal. I mean, it really is unreal. But there is at least in my case, there was such a dependency on the Lord through that process that I just really felt that my prayer life was just it was a special time for me. The other thing was, neither one of the guys I were climbing with, I don't know where they were in their faith, and so I kind of tried to make a point to talk about mine, but to do it in a way that I felt was that they were going to appreciate, and not kind of be like, oh, here we go again. Yeah. And so that was a lot of fun. I felt like I was sharing my faith more over those couple of weeks than I had done in a long time. And a lot of that, I think, is because a lot of my peer group and my friends, and obviously my church family, a lot of them are saved, and I know they're saved. I know where they are in their walk. And both these individuals may have been. I'm not sure. They didn't really necessarily respond when we had those kind of conversations. So I don't know, but I felt that was a kind of a special time as well, because I don't recall being around a group of other men for that extended period of time that I really didn't know where they were in their faith walk. And I just kind of felt like it's an opportunity to plant a seed.
Yeah. And that the community part interests me, because I think about people coming from all over. I mean, I'm sure you've met people at different camps along the way from all over the world and climbing these mountains. What have you learned about global community, other relationships that's really challenged maybe some things you thought before because of this experience alone?
Yeah, so Kilimanjaro and Aconcagua were definitely the most international trips that I've been on. They're 2 of the 7, so you got people coming from all over the world to do that. And one thing is, I'm amazed at how much we are more alike than you think. Now, it could be because everybody on this mountain has an interest in this activity. Right. So you're a little more like-minded, because even though people come from different cultures all over the world, you're coming there to essentially do the same thing. So that probably does play into it. But aside from that, there is more. There seems to be more in common than than otherwise. If you watch the news enough and you see what's going on today, and look, there's a lot of bad out there, and I'm very much aware of that. It just seems like there's you don't have the hate on the mountain that maybe you see in the press.
Yeah, I understand that. Sean, you mentioned that sometimes you're your own worst critic, and how I can imagine there's a little bit of a mental battle sometimes with what's going on between your ears. So how have you learned to navigate that as a father, husband, business leader? What does that battle look like for you, and what are some of the tools that you've learned to acquire over the years to handle it?
Well, it is ongoing. we don't have it figured out for sure. But yes, I am definitely my hardest critic. And I would say that that's probably not too uncommon for men, especially men that are, and maybe men and women, but from a male perspective, especially for those that are geared toward accomplishment. I am hardest on myself, again, on the things that I'm most passionate about, which are going to be family. I want to be a much better father than I am. I want to be a much better husband than I am. And instead of focusing on the 10 things done well, I'll find the one or two that I did not do as well as I would like. Fortunately, my wife in particular is very encouraging, and she is my biggest fan. And having that is great. A coping mechanism for me, and it kind of goes back to a little bit, what kind of got me into the mountaineering side, is fitness is huge to me as far as getting me in the right mindset. If I'm having a bad day, it's amazing what a 4-mile run will do. I believe in the endorphin release.
Yeah.
Again,
I've seen you on some of those afternoons in the neighborhood, and I'm like, must have been a long day.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, he looks so mad. But it's so that's been big for me. I also pray a lot when I run, and that's kind of an alone time. Everybody, I think it's healthy to have some alone time, especially when you're around people a lot and you engage a lot of people during the day, which I do. But so that's a big part of it. And then even more than the exercise, eating a healthy diet helps. And that's had to change as I've gotten older. I'll be 48 in a couple of weeks. I know it's still relatively young, but there are changes that I've made when it comes to that, and how I was eating in my 20s, if you will.
You could eat anything when you're in your 20s, right?
That's right. That's
then go run, do whatever you want to. Wouldn't feel it. Not when you get in your 40s.
That's exactly right. And again, I have a good group of friends, two people in particular that these are other men that, one is my brother and best friend, and then another is a best friend that I've had since we were in middle school. And, of course, both are believers. And to be able to share with those two, to know that they're praying for me, to know that they've gone through some of those same struggles, that's been great too. But it's definitely a work in progress. I don't know that I will ever be as kind to myself as I should be, honestly. But I accept that, and I know that. And I'm trying to do these things to get a little better at coping with the self-criticism, if you will.
That self-criticism, is it hard? Or are you the type person that you only put that on yourself, or do you put that standard on others? Because for me, I think I'm my worst critic, but I often, especially when I'm under stress or strain, put that same standard or on somebody else. And for me, it's only because my standard is automatically higher. Like I've elevated mine, but I can put that pressure on somebody else if I'm not careful. Have you ever wrestled with that, or is that something that for you is a lot easier to separate the two?
It's not that much of a challenge because again, the pressure that I put on myself is quite high. I know that I have never put the pressure put on myself on someone else. Now, has it, if I'm at a 10, if I put a 5, Absolutely, and probably more in the workplace than not, because we have families depending on us to make good decisions as leaders, and we have a really incredible leadership team. I've been super blessed over the last a couple of years. We really spent a lot of time building that group and developing that group, and to be a part of that and have that responsibility. I think you need to hold yourself to a higher standard. But I definitely don't put the pressure on them that I do on me.
So. Well, you're better than me, because that's an area where I definitely notice it when I'm under strain, that I will elevate expectations. But again, it's partly because mine are so elevated myself. When you mentioned several times your family and how important that is for you, you have a daughter that's in college now and two that are still at home. As a dad, what are some of the things you've done to sow into your kids, things that you believe will pay off, bring fruit in the future? Because I know I have kids as well, teenagers, that you're just like, sometimes you're wondering, like, but you are sowing, and you know that as you sow that God is faithful. What are some of those things that you and Crawford have said, hey, this is a non-negotiable for our family. We're going to put this as a priority to sow in the things that we want to in our kids?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, that's all honor and glory to the Lord. Number one, because I know, some great folks who had some struggles with children, and I am so grateful for just God's grace, because any good that they're doing is because of Him, not because of me. So, but early on, we had a home that we prayed a lot. We went to church. We played. Our kids have probably heard more Hillsong United played in the car and around the house than any other band. And I think those things were really important. Yeah. I think we're super fortunate to live in a community like Columbus, to where there are a lot of families that do prioritize their relationship with the Lord and church and family. And so fortunately, our kids have been surrounded by, I believe, a peer group that, not in all cases, but a lot of cases, those families are also trying to do some of those same things. But at the end of the day, I believe in the power of prayer, and with all the things that we have prioritized, and you prioritize a lot as a parent. For me, I always said that, I kind of had three goals. I wanted my children to know and love the Lord and have a relationship with Him. I wanted them to know that I love them unconditionally, and then ultimately, I want to do everything I can to make them good adults. And if I could do those, if I could check those three boxes, we're
three great ones.
That's right. We're on our way, right? So that was kind of always been our position, and then again, just praying over them all the time. I may start every morning on my knees, but the majority of my prayers are running, driving, sitting at my desk. But I do it all day, and I believe in it, and God's been very faithful, and I'm grateful for that.
When you think about your time in God's Word, is there a verse or a particular story or character that you often turn to that has been just one of those things that basically is a firm foundation for your faith to go back to?
Sure. Well, of course, I love Philippians 4:13. That's just always been a great verse, and I love my son, my middle son in particular, also loves it. He writes it on every new pair of golf shoes he has. So it's kind of he's a golfer, a good golfer. So that's fun. I love David, and the reason I love David was he is so incredibly flawed. And I'm not going to lie to you. There are times that I'm beating myself up about something, and I think, well, look what David did. So, but God loved David. Yeah. And he even mentions he does things for Solomon. He says, because I loved your dad. He loved David so much in the relationship that they had, that Solomon was even blessed due to the relationship that David had with the Lord. So he is absolutely my favorite character because he's a man's man. A lot of people they think of the Psalms, they may think of him playing a harp, or they may think of him killing Goliath with a stone. But if you read much about David, I mean, that guy he was a killing machine. I mean, he had a lot,
Yes.
going on, right?
Yes.
And so what they say, Saul has killed his thousands, David is 10,000.
Yeah.
So, but he was a very flawed character, but he was one that he loved the Lord, and he knew how to repent, and he had to repent about a lot. But to me, he's just, there's a lot of great characters in the Bible, but he's one of my favorites.
Well, the Book of Psalms is probably one of my favorite, and part of that I think is the raw honesty that David has. And you talk a lot about your prayer life, and I think that's one thing that you can quickly learn from David is there was no holding back. Like, I'm talking to God and I'm telling him everything, and that encourages me because sometimes I like to clean up my prayers. And honestly, when we clean them up, we're not really being honest with God or depending on him like we need to. And so I've learned a lot in that. And David is definitely a man's man. When you look at the life he lived and the honor too that he had for Saul, and how he pursued that whole situation. I mean, there's so much that we can learn from it. So thank you for sharing that. And Philippians 4:13, great verse. Definitely one of those that a lot of people cling to. You mentioned your middle son, or your middle child. Which one of your kids is most like you?
Oh man, they all have little bits. None of them, unfortunately, got from me the desire to have a clean room. So we joke around. That one came straight from Mama, because I'm a tidy guy, and they don't mind not making their beds. But they each have a little bit in me for sure. My daughter and I have so many similar traits, and she is, even though I'm not the oldest, I have a lot of traits that of an oldest child, and that is take away from my brother. I mean, he's a great older brother and a great first son. But there are some traits that I have as an
the
oldest.
fact that you have a tidy room, man.
There you go. Exactly.
Says you're more like an older.
Absolutely. But my daughter has a lot of my traits. But then I also see them in both sons. Sim, the golfer, is his commitment to fitness and working out and achieving goals. It's part of the reason why he was able to pick up golf later in life, and I believe do as well as he's done with it, because he's just, he grinds and he enjoys the grind. And then my youngest child is probably built more like me. I mean, he runs like me, he moves like me, and some of the things I see him doing as an 11-year-old boy with his friends, it takes me back, and I'm reminded. So, I don't know that there is one that is most like me, but it is really neat to see a couple things. One is how three children from the same parents raised in the same house can be so different in some ways. But then to also see certain traits that you know what they're thinking, because that's just a trait that you have, or where they're coming from because you come from that same place. They're each individuals and they're their own person. But it is truly a great joy to be a parent.
Well, I've watched you with your kids and with your spouse, and you are a phenomenal father and husband and just all around leader in our community. I see so many people that's whenever they speak of you with such respect and admiration, which says a lot, especially in a community like Columbus, where everybody knows everybody and knows what's going on in people's lives. I've never heard anybody speak ill of you or your family, and that speaks so much to the character, the way you live your life. And one of the things that I think has been a crazy recent development is you've kind of declared a candidacy for public office. And in our community, obviously everybody sees your name around, knows who it is. But can you talk a little bit about what compelled you to jump into the political arena? Is this something that's just out of nowhere? Has it always been in the back of your mind? And then, how... what it is you really hope at the end of the day, whether it's something that continues or ends with this candidacy, what is it you hope to achieve in that?
Yeah, great. Well, thanks for asking. And yes, this is a new thing that came out of nowhere. Just a little back story. Actually, while I was still in Argentina, Richard Smith passed away, and Richard had been in the State House representing this area for 20 some odd years. Was really well thought of, well respected. He was chair of the Rules Committee, and did a great job for Columbus. And one of the biggest things that I didn't even realize how involved he was his involvement in bringing the Mercer Medical School here, which that will be a lasting legacy on top of other things. But Richard was great and did a great job. But he passed away when I was against out of the country, and when I got back, it still wasn't necessarily on my radar.
Yeah.
One of my master's degrees is in public policy. So from an education side, I have a business and a public policy, political kind of education. And I've always had an interest there, but most of my last 25 years have been either raising a family, growing a business, and then a lot of community involvement, but it's not been political. Yeah. It's been everything from the Boys and Girls Club to the Rotary Club to most recently was just asked to be on the Infantry Museum. And but some people approached me and were like, Sean, we really think that you'd be good for this and would like for you to consider it. And so, of course, I go home and I paint it about as negatively as possible for Crawford. And she said, oh, yeah, you got to do it. And she did the thing that it's great when it happens, but we don't necessarily love it when it happens, is she used my own words against me. And one of the things that we have told our children is you don't get the right to complain if you're not going to do something about it. And she's like, Sean, there's an opportunity to do something about it. So we've jumped in with both feet. It's a whole new world for me. But I hope and I do feel that I could represent our community well in Atlanta. One thing COVID showed us was the importance of good state governance. Yeah. I was very grateful that I was running a business and raising a family and had kids in school in Georgia and not in some other states, because there were some businesses that were crushed. They were put out. There were some kids that still have not recovered from the schools being shut down as long as they were, and that sort of thing. So good state government matters, and that really showed it to us. So my hope is to kind of take my business background and my community background, and if given the opportunity, really just do the absolute best that I can for our community, for Columbus, for Harris County, and for the state of Georgia.
Yeah, keep us in the black as a state government. Yeah, it's nice right. to be able to have that in the state of Georgia. I know for me, being an Alabama resident growing up and then moving into Georgia, I'm super thankful for a balanced budget and surplus to be able to see that come back to us as citizens. So right. I know that whatever you do, you'll do a great job at it. And I am super thankful for your friendship, and just thanks so much for coming on the show today. You have so much wisdom and insight, and I'm sure we'll have you back on for another episode, just because I think we could talk for a while longer about a lot of different things in life, and especially on the side of the fitness and the challenges and really how you put yourself forward and learned how to push yourself and pursue excellence in all things. And that really is modeled in every area of your life. And thank you for what you do. Thank you for the way you honor the Lord. And thanks for being on the show today.
Well, thank you. This has been an absolute pleasure. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. God bless.